Old school Runescape banks. Some people like them clean and fancy. Others may like them a little darker or even cozy or familiar. And some people like their banks, I guess, sandy, maybe slightly alcoholic. Well, today we continue our quest of rating and critiquing every bank in old school RuneScape so you can find the bank that's perfect for you. Now, unlike the first two episodes of the series, we will now be rating these banks on a 5-point system. They will be rated on aesthetic, space, safety and cleanliness, location, and uniqueness. Otherwise known as the ASLU rating system. Now, if you remember, we will be rating these banks in the order they came into the game, and today we are starting with Old School RuneScape's 8th bank ever to come into the game, the first ever members bank to enter the game. I'm talking, of course, of the Catherby Bank. Catherby Bank actually came into the game the same day as the Al-Kharid Bank. This was the 27th of February, 2002. So let's begin with the aesthetic. This bank has a very nice and simple floor pattern, adds a little bit to the room there. We've also got a ranch style, I would say, architecture or aesthetic on the walls. I think it adds a nice touch and obviously matches with the rest of the town of Catherby. There are also two tall palm-like ferns that add to the room a little bit. I like that. I like their location and I like where they are, and they add a very nice green touch to the room. We've got 2 torches, open doors, 4 windows. They are all shuttered, by the way, and then we've got 4 lights lining the back wall behind the bankers. Now below those lights, there are 5 desks lining the area behind the bank booths, and the clock outside the bank, the 2 bank chest signs, is a very, very nice touch to the bank. It adds a very certain level of classiness almost. There's nothing super unnecessary in this bank, nothing in the way, nothing to distract you from just the reason you're here, but also the overall ambiance of it being a nice place to be, a very pleasant building to be in. It's nothing out of the ordinary. It's nothing maybe spectacular, but it feels clean, it feels classy, it feels purposeful in the way that it was built and designed and structured. From the outside, it looks like there's a second floor, but seeing as there's no ladder leading up or any possible second floor that we can access, or anybody can access for that matter, we can go ahead and assume that there are very high ceilings in this room, making it just a very comfortable, warm, open space for you to enter into. You can tell they had an aesthetic and a design in mind when they made the bank, and I think they pulled it off excellently. I rate this aesthetic 8.9. Now onto the space of the Catherby Bank. We've got 4 bank booths in total, so you probably will be bumping shoulders with some people in here. But as for the size of the bank, I think they maximized a lot of the potential in here. There isn't too much in your way. It feels comfortable yet professional. I think the space, even though it isn't the biggest bank in the entire world, that's not necessarily a negative. I think this bank utilizes its space extremely well. So beyond possibly feeling a little cramped or maybe a little claustrophobic at times, depending on how many people are in the bank itself, I think this is a very well-spaced bank. I think the space is utilized very well. I would rate this an 8.1. Now on to the third category, safety and cleanliness. The torches in this room. Now they seem to be sparking up quite a bit, and I do not love how close that is to a flammable notice board. I think that that's definitely a safety hazard, and I think if a firefighter walked in this bank, that would be the first thing that they would point out as well. Now, there's also a little bit of debris on the ground. It's clear that maybe this bank does not get cleaned as much as it should. And finally, I want to be careful when I make this point. I'm a bit concerned about how close this bank is to the shipyard. As we all know, some shady characters can be traveling by sea. I'm not going to take too much points off for this. I feel like that's more of an assumption on my part, but I think it's also worth noting. All in all, I give the safety and cleanliness of the Catherby Bank a 6.9. Location. Okay, now here is where the Catherby Bank really shines. Catherby in and of itself, the town Catherby, would be in one of those clickbait articles that's like, the place you need to visit that you've never heard of, right? And it's got some luxurious picture on the front. Look, it's close to the mountains, it's on the beach, it's across from a lightly densed forest. The location of the city or town of Catherby itself is exquisite, to say the least. Now that also benefits the Catherby Bank, but the Catherby Bank also, I do love that it's one of the first buildings that you run into on your way through town, right? Anytime you're gonna be coming through Catherby, you're gonna be passing the bank, and I like that about that. I like that it's a prominent part of the city and the town. and the location of the bank within the town, it's representative as such, and I appreciate that. If you're looking for a bank that's tucked away in a beautiful, sleepy, blue-collar town, this is definitely the bank for you. The location of the Catherby Bank, I would give this a 9.5. Chef's kiss to the location of the Catherby Bank. Now, finally, the uniqueness of this bank is really derived from its location, so without it, regardless of its pleasant aesthetic and functional nature, again, the uniqueness is really drawing off the location of the city and town itself, as opposed to the location of the bank itself, which, while I do appreciate, it doesn't make it necessarily unique in that way. I feel a bit harsh here, but I'm going to have to give the uniqueness of the Catherby Bank a 5.3. Now, I did all this math on a calculator. Definitely double check me. I could be wrong, but I'm going to go ahead and give the final score, and we're going to round up or down to the nearest 10th decimal. This will be a 7.7 for the Catherby Bank. In my opinion, an incredibly fair, honest, but also a decent rating for this bank. I think it's well-deserved. Now moving on to the 9th bank to ever enter the game. It actually came into the game on the same day as the Alcarid Bank and the Catherby Bank, so the 3rd bank to come in on the same day, February 27th, 2002. The 9th bank, Zenaris. Right after the Catherby Bank, it is the 2nd members bank to be opened and put into the game, and it is the 1st bank to have a quest requirement in order to access it, the quest being the Lost City. This is a very interesting bank. I'm very excited to hop right into this. So let's take a look first at the aesthetic. Now, the first thing that I noticed, and perhaps the first thing that you noticed about the aesthetic of the Zenaris Bank, is mushrooms, and more mushrooms, right? When you enter, you are passing tall, twisting, winding mushrooms. When you enter the room, the mushrooms are almost in these little windowsills glowing and lighting the room. So that really does already set the aesthetic and the theme for this particular bank. And it is very on brand for the city of Zenaris, or town, or village, whatever this may be. I'm going to say it's a city. Now, second, we've got 2 tall, prominent trees inside the bank. One with what I'm assuming is a vault at the top. I think that's what that would be, which is great, and we can touch on that a little bit later when we get into a further category. But again, these trees, in a very almost indirect way, add and contribute to the general theme of this mystical, magical area and bank that we've entered into. Now, the walls are a nice deep blue, which I appreciate, and it kind of transitions to white as you descend down the wall, and I like that. I like that the wall is not all consistently one color, but yeah, you almost just kind of get this, what do you call that? What do you call those like paint strips that like you pull one out like at like Home Depot or Lowe's, and it's like got like 5 different shades of blue or red or whatever. That's like what this is reminding me. What the fuck are those called? Are those called something? Whatever, it's not important. That's what it reminds me of, and I like that. I like that it's I don't know. I think that adds to the kind of randomness. It makes sense. It makes sense with the room. Now, if you'll notice, along with a lot of the other trees in Zenaris, these 2 trees in particular as well also have these vibrant red flowers, which also look as if they lead into, I'm gonna say, perhaps another room inside the tree. I'm not quite sure what's happening there. It looks like this is something you could go into, but I think that's a nice touch, right, to walk between these 2 trees, possibly houses, not sure. But we've got these vibrant red flowers that kind of poke out, and you really wouldn't notice these unless you stopped and looked around or stopped and took a moment in this bank, but almost subconsciously you're noticing these kind of rich, vibrant colors all throughout this area. Now, while this bank feels colorful and magical and whimsical and a bunch of other adjectives, and it clearly matches the city of Zenaris and the theme of this city as a whole, I'm very put off by this bank immediately, and here's the reason why. You have all these vibrant colors and natural themes, yet we come to the actual banking part of the bank, and we've got these 5 uniform brown bank chests that line this back wall, just lined up all next to each other, and I just have to ask the question, why? Why is this the case? These chests feel just so out of place for me. And the uniformity of them all, juxtaposed with the magical and seemingly random nature of Zenaris, it just feels wrong. Now, I would sincerely appreciate in the comments your opinions on this, but for me, this is just really off-putting. It doesn't make sense. I feel like this could have been done a lot better. I'm not sure why this is. It's just so uniform and so aesthetically off-putting. How it just feels like these don't belong here. These don't fit here. It's like they borrowed these from another town or something. I'm not sure, but all in all, I have to give the aesthetic of Zenaris a 6.2, and I'm surprised. I'm surprised by that rating. I was not expecting that rating, but I've got to be honest in these critiques, and there it is. Now, moving on to the space, I believe this is the first open air bank we've encountered. I love the openness you feel here. It feels small but cozy, and while also feeling open and freeing at the same time. The trees don't limit the space as much as you'd think, and honestly, the walls, it does have a nicely layered. I like the way it's layered. It adds depth to the space. I think this is a very rich and well-used space. So with that said, very simply, I'm going to give this an 8.6 for space. I think it's well-used, well-utilized, and contributes greatly to the bank. Now on to the safety and cleanliness category. I'd be remiss if I did not immediately point out the roaming orcs in the direct vicinity of the banks. Okay, that's a huge safety red flag. But now in terms of cleanliness, and I know I may get ridiculed a bit for this, or maybe labeled hypocritical in this way, but I gotta say, this is a dirt floor, obviously, in here, but because fairies are always flying, why would they ever care of the dirt floor? They're not walking on this floor, right? They're flying around it. And in that way, it almost adds to the charm of the place for me. I think it's like going to a dive bar. If you walk into a dive bar and it's squeaky clean, it would feel wrong almost. And that's kind of how I feel in this bank. I think, part of the theme and the vibe of Zenaris is just this kind of magical yet natural, these natural properties. And I don't know, I like it. I like that it's not clean, and I like that the bank has, it's got some rough edges to it, and I think I appreciate that, I guess. For those reasons, I really can't deduct as many points as you think. Now, lastly, I think it should be mentioned here again that the vault up in the tree, that feels very secure. I would feel extremely comfortable storing my valuable items and my gold here. So with all that in mind, I would rate this a 6.7 for safety and cleanliness. Fourth, we have location. I'm going to make this brief. It's far from the market. It's far from any method of transportation. It's not close to the center of the city. The bank is located in such a way, it almost makes you forget a bank is even in Zenaris at all, right? It's very tucked away, and in my opinion, too tucked away. I would give the location for this bank a 5.9. Last but not least, uniqueness. Zenaris is one of the most unique cities in RuneScape, and the bank is absolutely a part of that, right? And the bank specifically, we've got 4 bankers with seemingly no face. I would say that's incredibly unique. We've got the 2 very tall trees growing in the middle of the bank area, the glowing mushrooms, the open air, the mysterious attributes. You won't find this stuff at the Varrock Bank, okay? I'll just tell you that right now. So for the uniqueness of the Zenaris Bank, I will give this an 8.7, with the final score tallying up to what I would classify as a relatively disappointing 7.2. I think on paper, I was expecting this to be somewhere in the 8s, the 8 point somethings. And yeah, I'm quite surprised to see it in the low 7s, to be honest, but that's the score. And the final bank of the day, the 10th bank to come into the game, Sears Village Bank. This bank came into the game on April 9th, 2002, and I would argue is one of the more popular banks in the game. The aesthetic of the Sears Village Bank, it feels very simple and it feels very modern. The windows are single pane. Wood from the seating and the ladder match the pale beige walls. And another simple yet classic floor pattern, right? The walls feel covered, yet not too busy, and the upstairs feels like a very comfortable, bright, open space to work. I would say the aesthetic in here, it's very simple, it's very modern, it's very just classic. It's just the word that's jumping out to me in here. So, while it's maybe nothing spectacular, I think it's very well designed and very well done. I would give it a 7.9 for the aesthetic of the Sears Village Bank. Now moving on to the space, and I want to just get this out of the way now. The seating, the bench seating as you enter the room, it looks nice. I would say that, right? But in terms of space, I personally hate sitting near a door as people are walking in and out, and this is such a high traffic bank anyway. I would hate that. I also hate walking into a room and immediately having to walk past people. I don't appreciate that or like that at all. So I'm not a fan of this at all. And I think that this space actually could have been used in a little bit of a better way. I would have liked to seen these seating arrangements done entirely differently and maybe added a little bit more greenery to this room personally. Now, I will say once you are past this walkway, the room opens up quite nicely, right? There are 6 bank stalls that are spaced very well. And if you go into the upstairs work area, it's shared with the gated area. And even though it's seemingly the room is split in half, this work area really does not feel small. It does not feel crowded. The room still does feel very open to me. So I do think once you kind of get past that initial walkway, and the ladder, seemingly in the middle of the room, I would have liked to seen that a little bit closer to maybe one of the walls. I would give the space for the Sears Village Bank a 7.1. All right, we're on to the security and cleanliness of the Sears Village Bank. This bank is extremely tidy. I mean, I would recommend anybody to come into this bank and just stand around and just, you can almost marvel at how clean and tidy this bank is, right? There's no dust, there's no debris to be found on the floors or anywhere at all. The upstairs gated area, even when you go up there, that room feels very well organized. I think this bank is just very tidy and clean, and that really jumps off the page to me. Now, in terms of security, with 8 bankers behind the counter, it's very clear management is keeping this place running efficiently, safely, and organized. I walk in here and I feel like this is a well-run establishment, top to bottom. So for the security and cleanliness portion of the Sears Village Bank, I gotta give this a 9.2. I think it is outstanding. Now, the location of the Sears Bank, I gotta say, this is a bit tricky. This is a bit tricky for me. Sears Bank is, well, it's near the heart of town and to the west of Camelot Castle. However, saying it's in the heart of the town really isn't saying much, as Sears is a relatively small town. It's usually a waypoint for adventurers as opposed to somewhere people would come to dwell. There is really nice natural life around the bank. We've got some lovely maple trees right behind it and beside it. And some of those maple trees are near that pretty sizable pond, which is very nice and aesthetically pleasing, but I think that adds to the location a bit, yet I think this just equates to a relatively average location, to be quite honest. It just feels average to me, and for that reason, I would give it a 7.0 for location. Now, finally, the uniqueness of Sears Bank. This is really interesting to me. Sears Bank is interesting as its uniqueness is, really, it's derived mostly from its patrons, right? There's nothing particularly unique about the bank itself, apart from perhaps the statues upstairs or the narrow entrance, but, really, due to the high traffic of this bank generates a ton of traffic. And so this is one of the best banks for people watching. You really do not ever know who's going to walk through those finely constructed doors or what items they may drop on the floor, right? It's very unique, I think, in that way. However, I do want to note here, I think maybe this is the appropriate category to note this. And I had somebody comment about this in the last video, and I thought it was an excellent point. This bank is a critical piece to the agility course in town, which could be loud should you be working on the second floor. So I think that's well worth noting as well. If you are to take a meeting upstairs or to be working upstairs, if you're one of the bankers, you're gonna be hearing a lot of foot traffic for all those reasons. And this one was incredibly difficult to rate, and I hope you're compassionate on my rating in the Sears Village Bank, because this was a very difficult bank to rate. I'm gonna give the uniqueness an 8.1, which, if my math is correct, should average the total score for the Sears Village Bank to 7.8. Narrowly the best bank that we did review today. Excellent. Thank you so much for watching. I can't wait to get back out there and rate some more banks. If you liked the video, please subscribe. And if you didn't like the video, please hit the dislike button and then click the unsubscribe button if you already were subscribed. And then go ahead and leave a comment saying I'm never going to watch one of your videos again. That would be much appreciated. Hope you all have a splendid day, and thank you so much. Go fuck yourself.